Hey, welcome to the Piedmonters for Inclusive Education's first Neurodiversity series for the year, Understanding Your Child's Education Roadmap. PI supports all students by promoting neurodiversity and inclusion in Piedmont schools. We advocate for students with learning disabilities and differences. Our members are parents and supporters of our mission. Tonight's presentation is being recorded. If you sign up for today's presentation, you will receive a copy of the recording. It will be posted on our webpage. My name is Fairuz Abdullah, and I'm on the board of Piedmonters for Inclusive Education, and I will be your moderator for this evening. I want to remind you to please keep your microphones on mute during today's presentation. If you have questions, please write them in the chat. We will do our best to have your questions answered during our Q&A time period, which will be towards the latter half of our presentation. If you would like to join our mailing list, please send an email to piedmontpraiseK12@gmail.com. And now I'm going to go ahead and introduce our speakers. Today we are joined by Lilian Ansari, who is the program manager at Family Resource Navigators, which is a nonprofit that serves families in Alameda and Contra Costa County. Lilian has spent nearly 20 years advocating for families. She helps her clients navigate and access resources for children with disabilities at the local, state, and federal levels. She's also the mother of 2 children who have disabilities. Lilian is being joined today by her colleague, Carol Cohen, who has been working with families since 1997. She started working for Family Resource Navigators in 2006 and is currently the program manager of the Family Empowerment Center at Family Resource Navigators, which has a focus on IEPs. She spent 6 years on the board of the Community Advisory Committee for Special Education in San Francisco. She's also a former board member of PI, where she served for 6 years back when it was named Praise. She's a resident of Piedmont and a proud parent of 2 adult children, one of whom has a diagnosis of autism and Becker muscular dystrophy. So welcome, Lilian and Carol. And now I'm going to turn the session over to both of them to get started. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fairuz, and thanks everyone for showing up this evening. Just as Fairuz said, Carol and I both work for a nonprofit agency that serves families of children with disabilities from birth into adulthood with connectivity to resources, help supporting with support navigating the different systems of care like regional centers, school district, insurance, Medi-Cal, IHSS, and so forth. And everyone at our agency is either a parent or a sibling of a child with a disability. We also have great webinars, leadership opportunities. So at the end, we will share our website and contact information for you to reach out to us for more information if you like. So that said, I'm not sure who's here this evening, but this presentation tonight is geared towards someone who's getting just started in the process. There probably is a good bit of information for just about anybody, but it really is just what it says, IEP basics, and kind of geared towards someone who's just getting started in the process. And as I mentioned, we do have other training opportunities that you can check out on our website that maybe goes more in depth with some of the different subjects. And of course, you can always reach out to us. And I hope to spend about half of the time this evening going through the presentation, and then the second half to be able to hopefully answer your questions. Tonight, we're going to talk about what special education services are, who's eligible, what an IEP is, and some basic rules of the IEP. And then we'll also have some kind of highlights and tips on how to advocate for your child in an IEP meeting. So to be eligible for special education, you have to fit, a student has to fit into...
Lilian, it's not changing on the screen. Did you mean for it to?
I did.
Is this
I'm gonna start sharing again. I'm not sure what happened. Sorry about that.
fine? It's just,
So strange. Why all of a sudden? Let's try that. Okay, are you seeing the eligibility screen now?
no, it's black. Are you doing a slideshow or,
I am.
okay, try again.
I'm gonna try again.
There we go.
Okay, we'll see if it advances. If not, I might have to ask one of you guys to do it. I don't know what's happening. Always keeps me on my toes, this thing, the Zoom. So to be eligible for special education, a student has to fall under one of these categories. Deaf or hard of hearing or hearing impaired, visually impaired, hearing and vision impairment, speech and language impairment, orthopedic impairment, intellectual disability, autism, specific learning disability, emotional disturbance, other health impaired, multiple disabilities, or traumatic brain injury. We honestly can spend a whole evening talking about these categories, but like I said, tonight is really just an overview of the IEP. So did that go to the next slide?
Yep. Mhm.
Oh, phew. Okay. So in order to be eligible for an IEP, in addition to falling under one of those eligibility criterias, a student must require, not just benefit from services. That means it has to be absolutely necessary. Services have to be absolutely necessary for a student in order to be able to access curriculum and access their education. Not just, man, they're doing fine. It could be a lot better if they did. They would probably benefit from additional resources. That's doesn't usually work. It has to be absolutely necessary for them to access curriculum. And by accessing curriculum, I don't mean just academics, a social emotional well-being of a child, accessing the playgrounds, all of that. It kind of falls under accessing curriculum. Special education is again targeted for families for students that require services. Sorry, I'm losing my train of thought a little bit. So the special education includes some of the following that we are going to talk about a little bit tonight. The IEP includes goals, supports and services, accommodations and modifications, and what classroom or what placement, not necessarily classroom, but what placement a child is under. A student is not eligible for special education services if the reasons for them not accessing curriculum, accessing education is that English is their second language, they have a temporary disability, social maladjustment, which I don't actually know what that means or why that's mentioned. If Carol knows, what does social maladjustment mean? Do you know why we have that in there?
Yeah, it's for students that might be like in foster care, they're being bounced around from home to home and they're not doing well in school. And it's not because they can't do it, but their social circumstances are such.
Social circumstances. Okay,
Yeah, this
circumstances.
is directly from the Ed Code. So
I see. Okay, so that's what that means. Maladjustment. What does that mean? Because yeah, a lot of our kids are socially maladjusted, but where is it coming from?
That's where
So,
the statement comes from. Yeah.
okay, I gotcha. So social circumstances, I guess maybe in my mind would be better description of why a child would not qualify for special education just for that reason. Okay, so an IEP or individual education program is a legal agreement between the district and a student or a family. It kind of states how a child qualifies, what services they're going to receive, what accommodations they're going to receive, who's going to implement them, how, where, all of that is all written down. It's a legal document. It's a living document that can continue kind of to change as the child's needs change. It's decided through a meeting at a meeting between the district and a family members. The services and all of that, those are decided. Purpose of an IEP meeting is to provide FAPE, otherwise known as free and appropriate public education, to a child or student that's eligible. And the district, of course, is responsible for proposing a plan, and then the family can and the district work together along with using the evaluations and other expertise, including the family's input always, because one of the main parts of the IEP, one of the pillars of this process is parent participation and informed consent. So the data that the parents and the information the parents bring into the IEP meeting should absolutely be considered as part of the information and data and taken into consideration when an IEP plan is being put in place. And dare I say, it's one of the most important pieces because parents are the experts on their children. So the way this whole thing starts, these might be out of order a little bit, but you will, anyone can make a referral for an evaluation. A family member, physician, someone can write a letter requesting an evaluation of a child that's suspected of a disability. So the way the whole process starts is after you register for the district and then go through the enrollment process, registration and enrollment process, you'd write a letter to the district requesting an evaluation in all suspected areas of disability. Just stating, it could be something really simple. I'm concerned about my child's development. I'm concerned that my child is not accessing curriculum. I'm concerned about the following areas, academic, social skills, accessing playground, whatever it is that your concerns are, and requesting an evaluation by the district. Then the district has, from the date they receive the letter, they have 15 days to send the family a proposed assessment plan. Once a family signs the assessment plan, then the district has 60 days to complete the evaluation and present the findings in an IEP meeting and let you know if your child qualifies or doesn't. And if they do, then kind of putting a plan together to support the student. And the services are put in place as soon as a family or whoever has educational rights signs the IEP. Now, kind of a side note that in California, we can have partial agreement, or we can sign an IEP with an exception. And one of the reasons that's important is that you might agree with the eligibility criteria, and you want your child to start receiving services right away. You agree to some of the goals, you don't agree with a piece of it, and that's okay. You want to sign with an exception. You literally just kind of, where the signature page is, you write in, I agree, and there's a part that allows you to check the box that says I agree to all parts with the exception of, and then you can write in or attach a letter saying what you don't agree with. That way they can, the district can provide the services that you do agree with, and they can start providing that for your student, and it won't kind of hold things up.
Yeah, if you don't have a signed IEP, you won't be getting anything.
Exactly. And if you
that's for an initial IEP.
For an initial IEP, and then you have an ongoing IEP, the district has to implement and honor the last signed IEP. Yeah, Carol, please jump in anytime, because I get. Okay, so the evaluation process, as I mentioned, it has to be, and this also is kind of taken from the IDA, all areas of suspected disability. The district also is responsible for identifying students that have disabilities that can potentially benefit from services. There's a law called the Child Find Law, and they are obligated to identify and evaluate and provide services for a child that's suspected of a disability. We can spend an entire day, evening on the evaluation process. And for me, when I first became an advocate, that was probably one of the more complicated pieces to learn, was to understand the assessment tools and understand how some of the tools are normed for certain populations, some are not. How to read the evaluation. That's I think an area where a lot of kind of education can happen, is kind of understanding. But again, that's what the person that evaluates your child, it's their job to present their findings and the evaluation to you in a way that is that provides informed consent and helps you kind of understand it.
One thing I'd say is that all areas of suspected disability, if all you say is you think your child needs speech therapy, that's all they're going to evaluate you for. So you have to ask for a complete psychoeducational evaluation, with occupational therapy, with speech therapy, with anything you think your child might be benefiting, will help them access their core curriculum with.
Yes. Thank you. And then that's not a part of my slides, but I do feel like I need to mention about if you do disagree with the district's evaluation. Let's say you think your child needs occupational therapy, and the district evaluates your child and determines that they're not going to offer services. They're doing fine. They're getting by. They don't need occupational therapy. You can ask for an IEE, an independent educational evaluation, at district's expense. That means you're within 2 years of every time they evaluate our kids, within 2 years, you can ask for an IEE. And if you disagree with their findings, or if the report just does not represent who your child is, the district then has to either fund the IEE or they have to file due process. And anytime you have that disagreement, or in general, always get everything in writing, all communication in writing. They say if it's not in writing, it didn't happen. So if you disagree with the findings, you do have to explicitly ask for an IEE, either in a letter or formally in an IEP meeting. Mention that you disagree with the findings, you would like the district to fund an independent educational evaluation. And the district then has to respond to you within about 15 days. The IDEA says within a reasonable amount of time, but the unwritten rule is about 15 days. They have to respond with a prior written notice in writing, stating if
actually they don't
whether
do
they approve.
PWNs. They get back to you as a parent and say they do a PWN for approving it, but not for denying it.
Not for denying it. Okay,
Yeah.
good. That's when I didn't realize that. So, but anytime you do make a request in general, if they are denying a service, then you would want to ask for a prior written notice. You want it in writing, because the prior written notice states, they have different columns that says what you requested, what the action the district took, and why they denied your request. And sometimes when you ask for a PWN, things kind of happen. Sometimes they don't want to put it in writing.
We kind of did this.
Yeah, so we kind of did go through this already, about the timeline. Assessment is really important. It's kind of the kind of jumping off point from anything that kind of comes after that. That's where your child is determined if they qualify for services or not, and the goals are written using any area on that kind of shows a deficit on the evaluation. So it is really kind of a jumping off point. It's really important to have a good evaluation that really represents your child. That if somebody doesn't know your child, they pick up that psych evaluation and really get a good sense of who your child is and what their needs are. And the evaluation should always come with a recommendation at the end. I've seen a lot of IEPs where at the end the measures are there, the evaluation's there, and at the end it says something like the IEP team will determine services, but they should always have a recommendation because they're the experts in whatever area they evaluate your child in. I know there were a lot of questions about a 504 on, and we can address that sort of at the end. But that's, and I think it might be one of our, 504.
No, we took that slide out.
Yeah.
The school district may offer general education interventions, such as response to intervention, student success team, or 504 plan. But if you're really sure that your child needs an IEP, you can say, go ahead and do that, but I still want my IEP. And they have to proceed.
So what happens if you write a letter, you request an evaluation, and you get a call from a teacher saying, I don't think your child needs an evaluation. I think she's doing fine. And, the concerns you have, we do that for all the kids in my class. She doesn't need an IEP. She doesn't need an evaluation. And well, legally they do. Once you request it, they have to either evaluate or provide a reason in writing saying why they don't want to evaluate. They can't just deny an evaluation. That's not okay. But often school districts will suggest response to intervention, an SST, student success team, or a 504. And just to kind of touch on, because this was one of the questions, just to touch on what the difference is between a 504, the 504 and IEP. The main difference, I would say, is that a 504 is mostly provides accommodations for a student. You can actually receive services with a 504, like speech therapy or occupational therapy or counseling. But if a student needs all of those things, then they should have an IEP meeting. One of the challenges of a 504 is that there's really no data. There's not a lot of accountability associated with it. There's not the IDEA legal protections that the IEP has. Sometimes it's appropriate for a child. I've seen 504s work really well for kids that, say, have diabetes. They have anxiety, they have ADHD, they need to have preferential seating, they need to be able to take breaks whenever they need to be able to eat in class. Let's say, things like that work really well with a 504. But if a child needs, more services, then they should have an IEP. Anything else you want to say about that, Carol?
I'll say my daughter had a 504 plan because of her severe asthma. She would miss a lot of school every year, and it was about making up the work, how much time she had to make up the work. And
more time on tests. A lot of people want a 504 to get accommodations or more time on tests, which kind of they can use it on some, not all tests, but they can use it on some tests at school. The other difference is that, so can you have a 504 and an IEP? No, you have one or the other, because accommodations can also be part of the IEP. You don't need to have two separate ones. Once a child ages out of the school district, IEP is finished. There is no IEP in college or workplace or beyond. But a 504 falls under the Americans with Disabilities Act, and any agency or a place that has any kind of public funding has to accommodate a 504. So that can apply to colleges, workplace, that sort of thing. But an IEP, once they graduate or once they age out, it's over. So some of the rights you have as a parent is if you need interpretation services, if you need materials in in a different language, you have the right to ask for that. You have, and not just front desk person coming in, a receptionist coming to translate for you. It has to be an interpreter that does this kind of for a living and is able to kind of interpret the IEP. Always request that all reports are sent to you prior to the meeting. I don't like going into any IEP meeting for my own children or for others without seeing their reports. You have a right to see the reports upon completion. That's what IDEA says, upon completion, which means it could have been completed that morning. And but you also have a right to reschedule the meeting if you feel that you don't have enough time to review the reports. You can say respectfully that, I really need to have time to review the reports before I attend this meeting. And you can ask for it ahead of time. Also, for my own kids, I like to have the reports ahead of time, take notes, have any questions, and then in the meeting, rather than kind of sitting and having them read the report to me, I ask them to summarize it and then ask any questions that I have. So I'm not just like sitting there having them talk at me for 3 hours.
Yeah, I really strongly encourage you get the reports in writing, because it can be really difficult to be reading the report, listening to the report, and it's all for the first time, and you don't have a chance to react to any of it.
Yeah. So in California, we are allowed to with 24-hour notice, we can record the meeting, and the district also usually then will do their own recording, but they do need 24-hour notice. We highly also recommend having an agenda, a parent agenda, and you write, let's say, parent concerns or anything specifically that you want to address at the meeting. Keeps you on track, and then you can also ask the district to attach the parent concern letter or the agenda to your child's permanent educational record to kind of keep track of things that you've requested. I know Carol has written her own goals for her children. I don't typically write goals for my kids, but I do go in with concerns and things I want to have goals written for. But you can I think that's kind of something to think about what areas, what things you want them to kind of work on, and what goals you want the district to work on, so it can kind of contribute to that conversation. I also like taking, back in the days when we were having IEPs in person, I always took snacks and I always took a picture of my kids.
Yeah.
You can't do snacks, but you can do that on Zoom too. Have a picture of your child. And it's like, it really kind of helps center and ground the vibe of the meeting of, this is who we're talking about. This is the child we're talking about. I've taken videos to my IEP meetings, especially if, let's say, my child is doing something at home that they're not doing at school. I take videos because that's also data. Like I said, the information you bring in as a parent is also data. So samples of work, you can ask for the school for samples of your child's work, and you can also bring in work from home. I just realized that we're missing some of the slides. I'm sorry. We had some great advocacy tips
They're at the end.
that I'm missing.
The advocacy is at the end.
Let me see if I can. Yeah, that was the last slide.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
I think I accidentally must have deleted it, but I feel like it kind of wove it into what we were talking about. And I'm trying to think of what else. Let me see if I can find it. Sorry, so we can kind of talk about what we had. Are there any questions in the chat, or any questions that you had before, Firuz, that you'd like us to address while I look for that?
There weren't any in the chat.
No, but people can start putting their questions
or
in the
actually,
chat.
I'm also okay if you want to unmute and ask questions. That would be okay too, unless that's not the format that you guys usually do. But I'm okay with people.
Carol, do you want to start fielding the questions from the chat?
Yeah, I was just trying to see if I could pull up one of my big ones, and I've just gone to a couple IEPs recently that makes me think about this, is if you're not on the same page at an IEP as the other co-parent, it's not going to work. You should come in, no matter what your personal disagreements are, your priority is the child and to get the services for your child, so keep it together. Don't work at cost purposes. And I always brought snacks to my IEPs.
Yes.
Homemade cookies.
So we do have a question in the chat. Are IEPs only for public schools? And do IEPs transfer over?
Why am I not seeing that?
Um,
Not in my
I found the
chat.
advocacy tips, but yes, they are IEPs are only, well, not just for public schools, but there are non-public schools that, so there are two different kind of certifications, NPS, non-public school, and a private school. A non-public school is sort of the certification that is, it has a specific certification for schools that serve kids with differences or disabilities. A straight up private school, no, they don't. I mean, they don't have to implement the IEP.
So here's another good tip. Ask for written copies of rules or policies when you are told that we don't do that. Ask for the California Education Code citation when you're denied something
Yes.
that they just said, we don't do that. Oh, here's the rest of it. Okay.
I'm sorry, I don't know what happened, but here we go. Here's the rest. And I'm not going to make it full page if that's okay, because I don't want to mess it up. Sorry about that.
And I don't know why I can't see the questions first. So
yeah. So who can attend the IEP? Parent or guardian, whoever has educational rights, of course, the special education teacher and general education teacher. Also, even if your child is not in general education, a general ed teacher or someone that has great knowledge of the general education curriculum should be at that meeting. School representative, a school district representative, or someone that has decision-making power, called the administrative designee. Sometimes it's just a principal, but the principal doesn't always have decision-making power. So if it's something kind of big on the table, make sure there's someone from the district or someone that really can make decisions that's at the table. The student, if it's appropriate, my son started attending his IEPs when he started 9th grade. My daughter, who was more impacted by her disability, never did. So it's a good idea to kind of involve them. Some students like to record videos. If they are anxious or they don't want to attend the IEP meeting, they can record a video, talk about kind of what they need, say a little bit about themselves, like kind of any opportunity to include the students, I think is a good idea. School nurse, if your child has nursing services or kind of health issues, and anyone that has knowledge about your child's specific needs. You can take anybody for support to your IEP meeting. But if you take an attorney, you have to inform the district ahead of time. And then the district can also bring their own attorney. So IEPs happen, the annual reviews happen annually every year, and then our kids get re-evaluated once every 3 years, called a triennial, to kind of re-establish eligibility and make any kind of changes to the services you need to. But you can also request an IEP every 30 days if you need to, because there's so much fun. You want to have them once a month. But you can, if things are not working out, if something changes, your child gets a new diagnosis, something significant changes, you can always request an IEP, and the district has to respond and hold the IEP within 30 days. I feel like we kind of
covered that. Yeah.
Talked about FAPE a little bit. Yeah. So goals are one of the most important parts. I think I just said evaluations are, but goals also are a big part, a very important part of the IEP meeting. If you're going to spend some time developing the IEP, the goals should probably be one of the things that you spend a lot of time on, because services are driven by goals. For instance, if you go in and ask the district, just say, ask the team, I think my child really needs more speech therapy. That's not likely to give you more services. It's just too vague. I mean, more for what? More time for what? What are they going to be working on? But what you do instead is kind of talk about the goals. What are some of the things I want my child to be able to, work on articulation, or I want him to be able to have more than 2 exchanges when he's communicating, or want him to be able to have kind of work on social language, talking to peers, asking for to play with peers, whatever it is, work on some of those things, come up with goals, and then they have to kind of look at the services a child needs in order to make meaningful progress towards the goals. Goals should be measurable, achievable, and meaningful. Again, your expertise as a parent really matters, and the data you bring in matters. The goals should be able to be generalized in other situations. So if a child's doing something at school, they're not doing it at home in other situations, given the same circumstances and the same supports, we kind of need to look at what needs to be changed. Carol has a good example of an appropriate goal. Do you want to talk about your goal?
Inappropriate goal.
Inappropriate goal, yes.
Well, one of the things is, I'm sure those of you with IEPs have noticed that 80%, 4 out of 5 times, there's no magic to that. It doesn't have to be 80%. And the example is Johnny will cross the street safely 80% of the time as a very bad goal, because what happens the other 20% of the time? So it's okay sometimes to have 100% on a goal. And teachers act like, no, it's got to be 80%. And then they need to be an actual, Jenny will learn more words this year. What kind of words? How many?
Right.
In what categories is she going to learn the words? She's going to learn 5 new animals and 10 new colors, and be able to answer who and what questions. Those are all kind of like very specific. And
exactly. And
there's no limit in the number of, I've seen so many IEPs where they pile so much into a single goal. That's like, no, I think this should be 3 goals.
Exactly. And there aren't too many goals. If it's in emphasis on the I in the IEP, individualized. If a child needs 15, 20 goals, then that's what they need to work to make progress. And to access curriculum. There's no minimum or maximum. And kind of an example of what you were talking about, Carol, about the reading, we want to really pay attention to the baseline too. Where are they now? How many words are they reading now? What kind of words? And then the goal should be then whatever the next step is, whatever what are they going to work on? But it has to be very specific and measurable. And if your child meets the goal mid-year before the year is over, then that's fine. You can call another IEP meeting and change the goals. Sorry, Carol, what were we going to say?
I was just going to say that if there's no goal in a certain area, you're not going to get a service. So if there's no speech therapy,
yes,
you're not going to get
exactly.
speech therapy. So that's why goals are really important.
Goals are really important because services are driven by the goals. Another sort of example is comes up a lot for families that we support is a family wanting to have an aid for their child. You go in, and again, this can be its own kind of presentation or class, but you go into a meeting and say, I think I need my child needs a para. They need an aid in order to be able to access curriculum. Almost always that's rejected. But you have to kind of go at it in a way where you build the need. You talk about what the child's needs are. You write goals. And then when you're looking at the services, who is going to implement these goals? If a child, let's say, needs help with during all unstructured times, during transition times, who's gonna support them during those times? And then that's when you can propose para support during specific times. But if you just kind of go in and say, my child needs a para all day, that's most likely going to get rejected. So build the need, write the goal, and then look at what services you need to.
Lilian, I'm going to pause you right there because there's a question in the chat that is very specific to that question. And I'm going to go and read it right now. It said, I've been told that you cannot get an aid in the classroom for a kid with ADHD in Piedmont. This is for a TK child with a formal ADHD that is being taken out of the classroom due to disruption, brought to the principal, and sometimes we're even called to come pick him up because he's too disruptive. I want to get him an individual aid to help support him. Any recommendations if that is possible at all? And if so, what is the best approach to attempt to get that?
So there's no easy answer to that, unfortunately, but I want to say if your child is being sent out of the classroom or if you have to pick them up from school, make sure that there's documentation of that. One of the reasons that's important is that if those incidents add up to 10 in any school year, then the district is obligated to hold what's called a manifestation hearing to determine whether the child's behavior is a result of their disability or not. And in that case, it sounds like it is. So if during the manifestation hearing, if it's determined that this behavior or whatever challenges the child's having is a result of their disability, then they have to look at what needs to change, what services, what placement, what needs to change in order for that child to access curriculum. So you have to make sure that's documented every time they're sent out of the classroom. Anytime you're having to pick them up.
We also need to have a behavior plan or a functional behavioral analysis done. I also recommend if the child has come to harm themselves, that you get a pediatrician to support the need for an aid. If they're getting ABA services, get the BCBA to write a letter supporting an aid in the classroom to help the child, that the child needs the one-to-one in order to safely remain in the classroom and actually make some progress on their goals. So getting documentation is really important.
Yes, always. And if a district is telling you we don't provide, let's say, I don't know if this is happening, but I thought I heard you say that we don't provide aids for students with ADHD. I would like to see that in writing. I would always ask for their board approved policy in writing, because again, it needs to be individualized. If a child needs a service in order to access curriculum, and then they need to get that, and it's not. And remember that IDEA is a federal law that whatever local, it overrides any local policy. So it sounds like you need documentation. I really like the idea of asking also if a child is having some behaviors that are challenging, ask for functional behavioral assessment, an FBA, that then would lead to a behavior intervention plan, BIP, to see what, and that sometimes that also will show that a child needs additional support.
Lilian, another related question. About para support. What are the reasons the district won't let parents pay for their own para support? Something the person who asked this question offered to do in kindergarten for their child.
I mean, I think it's a liability issue.
That would guess.
There have been, I mean, known districts
To allow
who have
they allow the ABA to come in.
Exactly, allow the ABA therapist. Sometimes I've seen, and again, each district is different. There's nothing in IDEA that says that kind of states that you have a right as a parent to bring your own ABA therapist. There's no protection there, or para support rather. But I have had families that receive Medi-Cal, and some at the end of the IEP, if you've ever noticed, that there's a part that asks, do you give permission to the district to bill Medi-Cal? And this person said yes. Usually I advise families to say no, because then that can be, if you are receiving services outside the district, it can be duplication of services. You can get denied some things out of a private, when they're not at school. But in this instance, they did approve, and then the ABA provider was being billed under Medi-Cal, and they were coming to school and providing services for the child. It's very rare, but most districts I know don't want to do that because of liability issues. Examples of
examples, yeah, okay.
Yeah, examples of some of that. We kind of talk about it a little bit, probably. Examples, some of the services that could be put in the IEP that could be provided by the district are, and you'll get these. I'm not going to read off all of these. You're going to get the slides that you can kind of read through and see some of the things that the district can provide for your child. Assistive technology, that's a big one. You can ask for a specific evaluation if your child needs assistive technology, if they need help with communication, let's say if they're nonverbal or minimally verbal, and they can use an AAC device, an augmentative and alternative communication device. Mental health services, of course, that has its own evaluation called ERMS, and educationally related mental health services. If a child needs mental health services or counseling to access curriculum. And remember, when I say curriculum, I don't mean just academics. It's everything a child needs, like to be socially, emotionally well-being and academically succeed. Nursing services.
And just a little note on the AT. Districts are
Mhm.
actually required to determine whether a child would benefit from AT. It's actually a question on the IEP, and it's often really glossed over. And it's like, did you actually look? Or did you just automatically check, no, they didn't need it?
Mhm. So the assistive technology evaluation is often done by an OT, sometimes an AT specialist. It could be done by either one of them. So where can these services take place? The services on the IEP can happen anywhere in the general educational classroom, in a separate classroom, in a special day class, in a resource class, at an NPS or a non-public school, or a state school, or if a child is at a home hospital, these services can be provided anywhere. So another important part of the IEP is called LRE, least restrictive environment. That means a child should be placed, the first placement that's considered by the district should be the school and the classroom where they would be if they did not have a disability. So your homeschool in a general classroom with the right supports. If a child is not able to access curriculum or succeed in that setting, then they can kind of go to a more restrictive environment. And that can change as your child's learning needs and their circumstances change, their placement can also change. So these are sort of some of the examples of the kind of the continuum of placements or that a district should consider when placing a child. So a general education classroom is the least restrictive environment. Then the next step is maybe a general education a classroom within general educational public setting, rather, sorry, or a non-public school, and then a home or hospital would be the most restrictive, where they wouldn't have access to typical peers, and some of and they wouldn't be in the environment that would be similar to a general education classroom. So,
I have a question about that.
yeah.
Okay.
Or are you wanting to go through it? Or are we at Q&A?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was told that an aid is like the most restrictive environment.
Yes. That's a very popular argument that we don't want. Yes.
Yeah, it was confusing to me because I was like, what do you mean? An aid actually feels like the least restrictive because then they're getting to still be there, especially for younger kids. I mean,
exactly.
Yeah,
so there's
the answer. It's a popular argument that, oh, you don't want your child to get used to having an aid and it's too restrictive. Well, and I would say to that, there's nothing more restrictive than a child not actually being able to access school or curriculum. So that's more restrictive, but it's definitely a popular argument. I disagree.
So what do you say back to it? Like, is there a way to like? It just comes down to are they? I don't.
If they are denying,
are they just trying to do everything they can to not have to have individual aids, and so that's just like their talking point, or?
Well, again, they can't just deny a service without considering it in a meaningful way. So I ask for, like I was saying before, you build, you take the data, you build the need, you write the goals, and then you ask for the service. If they still say no, then you get it in writing, because they have to really spell out why they're refusing a service. And then you can take that prior written notice and file due process if you have to. I mean, that's pretty extreme, but you always want to get it in writing. it can't just be a conversation about, nah, I think we think that's too restrictive. Oh, he doesn't need it. Okay, thanks. Can you please respond to me with a prior written notice?
And the way to get them to respond is to send an email back saying, I talked to you today, and as I understand it, this is what you said. And if this is not correct, please let me know. And seeing it in writing, sometimes they don't want to see it in writing because it's like, well, that's really not the rules. So yeah.
That's a good point. So even if you
everything, I did everything back. Any conversation I had, there was actually a letter because we didn't have email back then, but or not meaningful email.
So you want to always get everything in writing. That's really a good point. So even if you have a conversation with someone, always follow it up with an email to get documentation and ask for a response in writing.
Okay. I guess I don't know if everybody else here feels the same, but I've been going into these with like the mindset of they are trying to do the best for my kid. But then when I hear what you guys are saying, it's like you should actually be going in with kind of the lens of like they're not really, and so you should document it. You know what I mean? I guess I maybe just need to change my mindset of like I've got to document.
I would say that I mean I always do a caveat that I don't think anyone went into special education ever to deny services to an individual child.
Okay. Yeah.
But the realities of running a district, the budgets, all these other things have put pressure on educators to be limiting what they can offer.
Okay.
Yeah. I do think that, and I think that going in with the spirit of kind of collaboration and understanding that we're a team. This is the team is here to support this child. That's how it should be. I mean, like I used to be a school counselor before I became an advocate. So I've been at that table as a parent, as an administrator, and as an advocate. So I've kind of seen how it works from all angles. I can tell you, as someone who used to, as a school counselor, run these IEP meetings, I was limited as to what I could say and offer in the IEP meetings. I was told by my principal that I can't say certain things because as an employee of the district, if I said that, then the district would be obligated to pay for it. I can't say that. So you do, it's, but I do agree, like Carol said, people don't go into this line of work to make $1 bajillion. They are there mostly to kind of help and support, but they are limited by funding, by resources, by whatever their job limits them. And anything you can do to kind of keep that spirit of collaboration, I think is useful. But that said, I don't think that it's unreasonable to hold people responsible for doing their job. It's your job. You're the voice for your child. You're the expert in your child, and your job is to hold them accountable, make them kind of do their job. And I don't think
being reminded that there's other questions, even though I can't see them.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I know it's 8:00. All right. So we kind of talked about, go ahead.
No.
We're basically done.
In terms of slide time.
We just have advocacy tips.
Yeah, advocacy tips, and then I have some resources that said. So we may have already talked about some of this stuff already. Always communicate in writing. Like I said, my understanding is this is what you just said to me this morning, and followed up with an email. And when you're told that we don't do that, we don't provide this and that, always ask for a written board-approved policy in writing, not just somebody kind of churning something out on the email and telling you this is our policy. No, board-approved policy in writing. Sometimes they can't find it. And then they have to kind of do what you're asking them to do. Come to the meeting prepared, know your rights, and ask a lot of questions. Meaningful participation by the parent and caregiver is a huge part of the IEP. Don't be afraid to ask questions, and especially when they're throwing all the, the evaluations and all of that at you, please just ask questions about what does that mean and exactly what you're trying to tell me. And make sure there is a decision maker at the table. We said someone from the district typically. Bring a support person. if you can, someone that can take notes for you. I like recording the meetings, and I always say, I'd like to record the meeting for note-taking purposes. So you can refer to it later if you need to.
I already said
This
that
is
one,
what this is what Carol was talking about. Leave your disagreements at home. You don't want to you want to be united front as much as possible. You don't have to sign the IEP meeting. There's some pressure by the district sometimes that we have to wrap this up. We have to finish up the IEP, and we're out of compliance. Blah blah blah. You can just say it up front when you start the meeting that just want everyone to know that I'm not going to be signing the IEP today, and I need some time to kind of look through the evaluations, to read through it. I'll get back to you, but I won't be signing it today. And there's no time limit for an IEP.
Sometimes they'll say, we have an hour. And the first thing you're going to say is, okay, everyone pull their calendars out. Let's pick another time to meet because we are going to need longer than an hour. And if you don't, then you can cancel it. But while everyone's there, get everyone committed to another meeting.
Yeah. And I don't personally like people leaving in the middle of the IEP meeting. A lot of times they'll say, oh, well, so-and-so doesn't have coverage for their class. They need to leave. I don't want to be difficult, but I feel like I'll say, I really value your input. I would really like you to be here for the entire meeting. You see my child every day, every week. I really want to hear what you have to say. And maybe we can reschedule for a time where everybody can be here the entire time for the IEP meeting. They will ask you to excuse certain members. Sometimes that's appropriate. That's okay. Like if it's part 2 or 3 of an IEP meeting and you've already talked to the OT, you have their goals, they don't need to be there for the second part. For the sake of sort of ease of scheduling, I think that's okay. I've done that plenty of times, but it's up to you. It's up to the parent or the person that has the educational rights to excuse members, and not just at the meeting, but before the meeting. You have to sign something that says you excuse them. Okay, that's about all we've got. I've got some resources. Again, you'll get the slides. So you kind of go through. North Region SALPA has some great resources on their website. They have some kind of previously recorded webinars that actually was done by me a couple of years ago, where it really has some great information, kind of smaller, bite-size, digestible parts of the IEP and kind of different things that you can kind of go and check out. You can always reach out to us at FRN, and we'll kind of share our contact. Also, if you need any support with regional center, with any resources and information related to IEP, you can kind of feel free to reach out to us and check out our website, familyresourcenavigators.org. So that's all I have as far as presentation. And please, let me know. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great. So I'm going to read the next one in the chat. My family is considering moving to Piedmont from another state. Our son in 4th grade currently attends a private LD school. He recently had a full psychoeducational evaluation done, which has a list of recommendations. What steps should we consider before moving if we want him to attend public school after we move?
So if a child already do they already have an IEP? If they already have an IEP, the new district has to follow the last signed IEP as close as possible.
Hi, I'm the one who asked. I'm sorry to interrupt, but just to save you time.
Go ahead. No, please.
He attends a private school and does not have an IEP.
Doesn't have an IEP. Okay. So if they don't have an IEP, then after you go through the enrollment, ask for an evaluation right away.
Sure.
Who did the evaluation? The district or a private?
We hired a private psychologist who does a lot of these, and it's a very detailed evaluation. It has a number of specific detailed recommendations. So we weren't sure whether that could become part of a 504 or what.
It's up to you if you want to share the report with the district or not. The district is obligated to consider the private evaluation. They don't have to accept it. They have a right to do their own evaluation. They will. They don't just take
Sure.
the private evaluation and start writing goals. They will want to do their own evaluation, but they will consider the private. Yeah. Anything
Okay, and it
else
would make
that you
sense,
want
I
to
take
bring
it.
in.
Sorry, it would make sense to share it with them pretty much as soon as we enroll him, I assume.
If you like the report and if you
Sure, we
if it
do.
kind of supports what you're trying to do, then yeah, absolutely. But again, remember, sometimes when the district does, I mean, Piedmont's pretty good about this, but sometimes even if they pay for an evaluation themselves, they don't always accept the recommendation.
Got it.
But
Thank you very much.
Piedmont's pretty good about that. I would just like right away a request, and it's the timeline is what we just kind of were talking about earlier, where as soon as you request the evaluation, you sign the assessment plan, you get an assessment plan. After 15 days, they'll give you an assessment plan, and then they have 60 days to complete the evaluation and present their findings. And anytime school is out more than 5 days, the timeline stops. So nothing happens during summer. During the holidays, the timeline kind of stops and then starts back up again.
Yeah, and you have to be enrolled in the school before the school will evaluate.
Got it. Okay. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Next question is, my child has a 504 plan at Piedmont Middle School. We have worked closely with counselors at PMS and have been very happy with the response from them. However, it is a challenge to make sure all of his teachers are aware of his plan and make an effort to respond to its elements. Our child is moving on to Piedmont High School next year. Any suggestions on engaging at the high school level where academic pressures are high?
Well, one thing I would say is if you have any modifications in that 504 plan, which my daughter did, when she hit high school, they were like, we don't have to take any of these modifications. Like, we can do some accommodations, but we can't accept this and this and this and this because she's in high school now.
Yeah, so it is hard. And that's part of the challenge of a 504 versus an IEP. There's not a lot of, it doesn't have a lot of teeth. A 504, there's no data taken. There's not a lot of accountability. It's hard. So you have to just kind of keep advocating for your student and make sure the teachers all know what's happening. It is hard. I won't lie. That's part of the challenge of a 504. You have to kind of keep requesting whoever your 504 coordinator is to kind of get the information to the teachers. And sometimes you can also, this is another class that Carol teaches, is kind of having like an introduction for your child.
Oh yeah, the one page, getting to know my child.
Pager. That's a really good one where you can come up with a 1 page or 2 page information about this is who my child is, this is what they like, this is what they don't, this is what they have going on, this is what will help them, and then attach the 504. It shouldn't be your job to do it, but sometimes that's the best way to get the information to all the teachers, is just kind of have a summary of what they've got going on and kind of hand it to them the first week of school.
Thank you. Okay, the next question is, how do you know what goals to ask for? Is there a goal library? How can you figure out what you need? It's incredibly frustrating to have the school district tell you what the goals are when they don't match, not knowing where to go for help.
Well, the district uses a goal bank. You can do the same thing. There's an app for that. You can use a goal bank. There are, on some of the websites that I mentioned, like understood.com, Undivided, they have goal banks. But I think that, Carol, I really want you to chime in. But in my opinion, I mean, your job as a parent is to identify the areas of need and identify what it's part of your job. But the goals should come directly from the evaluations and that are done. Any area that shows a deficit or where the scores are low, then the goals should come directly from the evaluations that are done. There should be a goal written for every area of a deficit or a disability that comes from the evaluations. That's why it's really important to start with a good evaluation that really represents your child, and that's the type of tools are used that are normed for a particular student.
Yeah, and when I hear about how a student is doing, Like when I go to an IEP with the family and I hear them say something, I'm like, sounds like that would be a good goal.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not actually writing goals for families, but I'm like listening all the time. And they're like, well, she's having trouble with this and she, social skills and this. Well, that sounds like a really good goal. And they usually be like,
Right.
oh, okay.
Yeah. So the area we need using your judgment about what you think they need, challenges they're having, and then the evaluations, um, things like self-advocacy goal. That's something that's not often, I don't know, that's kind of missing from some of the IEPs that I've attended. So the child is not, they don't always ask for help if they need to. They don't always ask for a break if they need to, things like that. That can always be a goal. But just kind of like Carol said, pay attention to what their needs are, what challenges there are, and just go through the evaluations with a fine-tooth comb to see any score that's low, there should be a goal attached to it. And not just academic, but social, emotional goals.
Language.
If you disagree with the district's assessment and ask for an IEE, how likely is it that they would file for a due process instead? Can you pay for an independent evaluation yourself and have the district reimburse?
I'll let you answer
An
that.
IEE is, yeah. Well, an IEE is, like I said, fund or file. Once you request it, it's the district has to fund or file for due process. I have seen districts take families to due process. I think that past 15, 20, or whatever, however many years I've been doing this, I've seen it 3 times, maybe.
Yeah, it's not very common.
It's not very common. Can you pay for an evaluation yourself and get the district reimbursed?
You can.
It's harder. You can try. It's harder, but you want to get the approval by the district. You want to get the district to say yes, they'll pay for an IEE, and then they typically contract with the provider directly, and they'll pay the provider directly. I wouldn't recommend paying for it and then asking the district without having the approval for the IEE. You're not likely to get reimbursed without involving an attorney, and then that's going to probably end up costing you more. So I wouldn't recommend it. And remember, the district is only obligated to consider the outside evaluation. They don't have to accept the recommendation. Even if they pay for it, even if an IE is approved, they have an evaluation, they're not obligated to accept the recommendations. That's pretty rare also. If they pay for an IEE, most of the time they do. It does happen, but if they pay for it, usually they will accept the recommendations.
What advice do you have about a nice kid with good behavior? My daughter works hard, does her homework, has good grades. It looks like she's in 6th grade. Has dyslexia, has a hard time with reading, and they keep whittling away her goals.
What do you mean? Like just continuing the goals from one year to another?
No, it sounds like they're cutting back on goals.
Yeah, it sounds to me like that's what the writer meant, that they're cutting back on her goals.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, it shouldn't be. Goals should not be kind of
I mean, is she meeting her goals and then they're not writing new ones? Or are they saying she didn't meet this goal, so we're just not going to make this goal? Because there's two things that could be happening.
If the person who wrote this in the chat is still
if you
on,
kind of say a little bit more.
Please unmute and ask.
I mean, that really shouldn't be happening if, the goals should be sort of aligned with Common Core standards, and a child should make a year's progress in a year's time. It doesn't mean that they are necessarily doing grade level work, but they could be delayed, but they should still be making progress in a year's progress in a year's time. And I would want to know, what are they, if they're not meeting the goals, then I would want to look at the services. This is a place where a parent probably shouldn't agree to changing the goals and not consent, and kind of go back to the IEP team and talk about what services can be added, what can be done so that this student can meet goals, especially if, let's say, the scores are showing that they are capable of achieving or doing grade level work, or then there's no reason why they should be dumbing down the goals. They should be adding services or for that student to be able to meet their goals.
Now, if a child is working at grade level, they do not have to write a goal about it.
Right.
So
because it has to be the services have to be absolutely necessary for them to access curriculum. They don't, if they're meeting the goals, then no, doing grade level work, they don't have to. They're doing
Okay, it looks like that is the last of the questions in the chat. Is there anyone else who's listening who'd like to unmute and ask a question? You can do so now. Okay. Carol and Lillian, do you have any closing remarks you'd like to share with the group?
Just remember that this is really as hard as it seems. Give yourself grace, educate yourself, know your rights, and ask for support and ask for help. I just, want to say that I'm a first generation immigrant. By the time I was in my early 20s, I'd gone through a war, a revolution, fleeing a country, living on my own, putting myself through school, all of that stuff. And when I had the two kids that I do now with the medical issues and with the disabilities, that was by far harder than anything else I had done before, even with everything that I had gone through in my life. So it's hard, but there's a lot of support out there, agencies like us that you can kind of reach out to get support and to get all the information, educate yourself, know your rights. And like one of my mentors say, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, right? So
and
that's
I'd
all I
also
have.
say we have trainings coming up. We have one on recreation that's next week. They're all on our website. We have IEP 101, Learning to Advocate for Your Child. We have my first IEP, we're doing a transition to middle school and high school, and we're also doing a transition to adult services beyond high school. And those of you who have high school students, we're helping plan the transition fair for Alameda and Contra Costa County. So there's a lot of stuff coming up. Check our website.
And I think that there are some of their trainings are also on YouTube, but if you reach out to one of us, we can kind of connect you to the right place. All right. Thanks, everyone, and good luck advocating for your children.
Thank you for being here. We really appreciate it. And thank you, everyone, for joining us virtually. Take care. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.